Hello, welcome, please come in. It's time for another FF12 video, this time as a bonus episode. Why a bonus episode? Because a few weeks back I hit 1,000 subscribers and that felt like a good milestone to celebrate. Why an FF12 video? Because I couldn't really think of anything else I wanted to do, and the FF12 videos get views. And for this challenge I'll be going through the entire game with only time mages, or time battle mages as they are referred to in this game. I elected to do time mages because time mages actually appear very rarely in maid-numbered Final Fantasies, essentially only existing in Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy XII, which just isn't enough to do a full series. Further, time mages, as a standalone class, are awful. They get crossbows, which are bad, and a bunch of time magic that is basically worthless the vast majority of the time. They can be a good secondary class, granting access to haste, slow, and float, but as a primary class, they are just awful. And while they aren't the worst class to solo, I think White Mage is probably going to take that, they are the worst that has no real links to any other games. At least not the main numbered games. So today, I will be doing time mages only, and hoping it isn't awful. Rex has a bad day, then Vaughn goes out to hunt a tomato. I have assigned his class as Time Mage, but I can't actually get any crossbows yet. At least not easily. And honestly, I want to stick with Vaughn's starting dagger as long as possible, because crossbows are not good. Next up is the Giza Plains to join up with Pinello to get a Sunstone for later. The shop here still doesn't sell any crossbows. I do pick up Slow and a few onion bolts in case I pick up a crossbow out in the wild. Slow is actually fairly useful, with a lot of enemies and bosses being vulnerable to it. I mean, I say useful, but it will very quickly become not useful. Touch some shiny rocks, and the Sunstone has been acquired. Then it's the usual sneaking through the Garam Scythe waterway. Still no crossbows, and no time magic worth using, so this run is pretty normal. My attacks are probably a bit weaker than usual, I guess, since I'm still stuck with the basic dagger. Do some shouting, sneak through a palace, then meet up with Balthier and Fran. Neither of these two will get to be permanent party members, for reasons I'll get to, but Fran does start the game with access to Cure, which is useful in spite of her bad magic stat. Then the Flan boss fight, which dies to Fran casting fire a bunch per usual. And then I get my first crossbow. This chest has a small chance of having a bowgun in it when opened. It's also close to a scene transition, so it's pretty easy to farm the chest to get 3 bowguns, which actually only takes like 6 tries, so that's pretty easy. And because I got those onion bolts from earlier, I can actually use the bowgun immediately. Into our next boss, Firemane, which dies very quickly. Crossbows have drawbacks, which I will get to, but I think the first bowgun is a pretty strong weapon for this point in the game. I barely even have to heal. Time for a pit fight. Nothing exciting here, just punch a bunch. Then get my equipment back, and it's time for a brief trip through NAA Dungeons. And honestly, the bowguns are holding up quite well here. I'd only ever heard bad things about crossbows, maybe they actually aren't awful. Down here is a shop, so I can finally outfit my whole party with heavy armor. That's right, time mages equip heavy armor in this game. Probably because, for reasons that don't actually make sense, crossbows deal damage based on strength in this game. Then through the Barheim Passage. You know, I'm starting to wonder if the difference in play isn't that crossbows are good, it's just that magic is tedious. Because these bowguns are doing great work, but that may just be because magic isn't consistently good, and MP is always an issue. I suppose I'll find out when I do a challenge with another class that has better weapons. And boss time. And yeah, this fight is basically as easy as ever. I do take some time to slow the queen, as it is vulnerable. This helps reduce its offense by a lot. Then it's just fire bolts. We'll see how long that lasts. Then the long run back to Rabanastre, join up with Bosch, who actually gets to be added to the party this run, because Bosch has the highest strength in the game, which means his crossbow damage will also be the best. Probably still not good, but best. And while this limits my healing, because Bosch's magic stat is bad and he won't get any healing anyway, it is worth the trade-off. Fran and Balthier rejoin the party, and it's on to Bujerba. Balthier is out of the party because Fran has Cure, and neither of them are really equipped stat-wise for strength damage. Bujerba sells some better armor, which is always appreciated. Then it's into the Lusu Mines. The Lusu Mines are basically the same as ever, just run through to the end. Lamont is in the party and has access to actual healing magic, which is always nice. Then there's no actual boss, just Begamnon and crew, who aren't worth fighting because they give no reward. Lamont is out of the party, and it's time for shopping. I can buy new crossbows to get my damage a bit higher, then get captured and storm the Leviathan. There aren't really any items here I want, so I just run through to the next boss fight. A bunch of random dudes! And crossbows deal good enough damage fast enough to burn down this fight. I am starting to feel my lack of healing ability. Having only one healer in the party is a bit rough, and I won't actually be fixing that anytime soon. But it's time to grab my third and final party member, Ash. Ash has the highest magic stat in the party and starts the game with Cure. She's not the strongest, but since she's going to be my only healer, she will be too busy to worry about dealing damage most of the time. Get her equipped up, and it's time to run back through the Leviathan with sirens blaring in my ear, and another boss fight with Judge Geese and some friends. My damage is great, but unfortunately this hangar counts as outside, which means my crossbows can now miss pretty consistently, which is the biggest issue crossbows come against. I have no idea why they did this. The good news is my damage, when I do hit, is still quite good, and Geese is vulnerable to slow, so the fight ends in my favor with no real issue. Brief trip to the Marquis, and then to the Westersand to start the long trek through the Sand Seas. The Sand Seas are, as ever, very boring. There are a lot of enemies in the way, which is nice for experience, LP, and loot for Gil, but the trip through is still pretty uneventful, which it basically always is. There is a treasure chest at about the halfway point that can have a better crossbow, but it takes so long to get one, I don't even bother trying to get a second. Probably would have been better not to waste my time on this. Then stop at the shop where I can buy the exact same crossbow. I get why they changed some weapon access in the Zodiac Age version, but it does mean I occasionally get very confused about where and when you can access certain weapons. Boss time! And Garuda's only strength is being a flying type enemy, which means nothing when I have crossbows. First demon wall isn't worth fighting, and the second demon wall goes down very quickly. You know, I was really expecting time mages to be absolutely miserable, but I am actually dealing okay damage. And it's early enough in the game, Ash can keep the party up and running with just Cure. Wraithwall's Tomb is up next, another area where I can just run through shooting everything with crossbows. Time magic itself may be basically all garbage, but I will say crossbows are holding up a lot better than I'd expected. Unlock the way forward, and it's time for what I would consider the first real boss, Balas. Balas is another boss that is vulnerable to slow, and that's really all it takes to drop down half its health. Its follow-up Viraja attack is very strong, and Vaughn does go down, but it's only briefly. A Phoenix down and a few high potions keeps me alive through the second half of the fight. Okay, so that was legitimately surprising. Why is Time Mage doing so well? There's nothing good about it. The next boss fight is Vosler. Let's see if that proves tricky, like it has in prior runs. Because this boss has ads, I actually get to use a new spell, Immobilize, which basically makes the random troops do nothing because I have ranged attacks, and they do not. Vosler is vulnerable to slow, but also has Reflect, and despite my best efforts, my party gets wrecked, as expected, by Vosler's very strong attacks in Phase 2. On the second attempt, I throw out a Dispel Mote to take out Vosler's buffs. He recasts Reflect, but removing the other buffs is essential. It's very close, with both Bosch and Vaughn going down, but by manually making a final attack, Ash clutches the victory. Okay, so that was a lot closer. Definitely more interesting. Any boss that starts to combo at low HP can be a real pain to deal with. Wraithwall's Tomb and subsequent boss completed, it's time to run through the Giza Plains wet. Then the Osmond Plains. And into Jahara. Here, I reunite with Larsa, who joins my party on the way to Baromises, and a new crossbow, which goes to Bosch as my dedicated attacker. Back into Osmond Plains, and some treasure manipulation gets me 3 sets of long bolts. These deal the same damage as the onion bolts I have been using, but these also inflict slow. Which means I no longer have to cast slow against slow vulnerable enemies or bosses. It also means another time magic is completely useless. Then it's time for grinding, because I've reached the first good money spot. Shooting all these panthers until they drop the items I want to make loads of money. Which is interrupted by not having enough gold needles, so time to head to a root village. Here I buy 2 more recurve crossbows and a bunch of gold needles. I'll want to buy some better armor, but I'll need some money first. But here I can also pick up the incredibly useful haste spell, one of the few time magics that is, and will remain, useful. I will be using this quite consistently throughout the rest of the run. Back to grinding! And back to a root village to grab better armor, and an assortment of accessories that may or may not prove useful. Urut Village completed, it's time to head back through Golmore Jungle and then into the Hen Mines. And this area has a lot of places where there are a decent number of enemies. And if nothing else, this is a clear issue with time mages. I don't have any multi-target attacks. At least not any worth using. Which, after black mages and red mages, I miss my AoE damage. Other than that, there isn't really anything useful here, so it's time for the next boss. And yeah, this boss dies very quickly. Larsa and Ash combined can easily keep the party alive, and the one nice boon of having only crossbows is they are ranged, letting me split my party up around the field to not always get hit by every AoE a boss throws out. Next boss, Elderworm, which also demonstrates this really well, because its big Sporefall attack inflicts a bunch of statuses, but only hits one target because my party is so spread out. Sporefall is the only thing that this boss has that is actually dangerous, so yeah. Through a brief section of the Paramina Rift and to Mount Baromises. Here I pick up the next big time magic purchase, Berserk, which boosts one character's speed and damage, but you can no longer control them, which makes it great for Bosch, who should never do anything other than attack anyway. Back down through the Paramina Rift, this area is outdoors and has weather, so I don't want to spend any time here with my crossbows. So I immediately rush down to the Still Shrine of Miriam. Running through here, I finally start to feel crossbows starting to fall off a bit. Like, they're bad, since I'm indoors, but it takes a lot of hits to take down anything. And it's time for more grinding, because I've reached the next big money grinding spot. This area, which has just so many undead. Now there is actually a crossbow here, but it's a rough chance chest, so I never actually get it, despite all the grinding I do. And on the way to the next boss, I finally unlock Berserk magic on Bosch, which means it's time to unveil my new boss strategy going forward. Von casts Haste, Bosch casts Berserk. This combo means Bosch will attack 3 times as quickly and deal extra damage. Let's see how Venuskar handles that. Now you should note, all my characters are being slowed by the magnetic field here, which I can't really do anything about because my whole party only has heavy armor. And I still killed the boss fast enough that it doesn't even matter. Yeah, I think I'm gonna like Haste and Berserk. Okay, let's see how that combo handles a boss that isn't throttling my speed. And the answer is quite well. Bosch makes attacks in such rapid sequence, it's kind of wild. And while my healing is still really bad, no one in my party even goes down. Bosch just deals so much damage. I burn right through the bottom section of Marius' health bar. This combo is more impressive on a better weapon, but it's pretty good on crossbows. Still Shrine of Miriam behind me, it's time to return to Baromises to deal with pesky Judge Bergen. I never got the crystal at Baromises. Guess I'll have to run manually. How did I not get the crystal? Silly Zav. And back at Baromises, I can pick up new crossbows and new armor. Actually use the crystal here, and it's now time for Bergen. Bergen starts the fight with adds, but they die too quickly to be of any note. And while I recall in prior fights Bergen hitting pretty hard, he doesn't seem to here. Though that may be because he died just so fast. Alright, Bergen's a boss that normally gives me a bit of trouble, but it looks like the stories of crossbows being bad may have been a bit exaggerated. Oh, I love when a 2-hour recording is just labeled stupid. That's always a great sign. Normally I put the last thing I accomplished in that recording session, so first things first, take a leisure craft to Nalbana to buy 99 teleport stones, because I want to never have to think about teleport stones ever again. Then north through the Mosforan High Waste. I pick up a Thief's Cuff accessory for later, and keep moving onward to the Fawn Coast. Buy some better equipment, and it's back to the Still Shrine to do some more grinding for Gil. Now I'm starting to notice how badly Cure is not cutting it. In Black Mages only, Cure remained pretty useful throughout the entire run, but that was because Black Mages have 16 magic lures and mystic armor. Time Mages are in heavy armor and only get 9 magic lures. It also doesn't help that Ash is trying to shoulder the entire healing obligation by herself, which isn't going great. However, unlike Black Mages only, I have options. Back to Jahara and into Zertanan Caverns. This area is a bit above my level, as evidenced by how much damage I'm taking, but there's a boss here that I'm after. Because Time Mage actually has a useful license locked behind a mid-game Esper, as opposed to a post-game Esper like they normally are. Which means it's time to take down a Dremelech. This area has a bunch of undead that spawn, but I can take these out by keeping my distance from the center of the room. And my damage against the Esper is actually quite good. Then comes the actual problem, Thandaja, which deals bonkers damage to my party and sometimes inflicts stop. I can run back to the prior zone to survive, but this resets the boss's HP. Okay, so that's not working, but I really need to kill this boss. So time to do some grinding, but for levels this time. But no reason I can't get those levels while advancing the main story. Time to head through the Fawn Coast, then into the Tichita Uplands. Having gained some XP, I warp back to Jahara. Let's see if a Dremelech is within my reach now, shall I? Fight starts good, with me devastating the boss as normal, then Thandaja brings my entire party down to critical, and stopped. I briefly try swapping to one of my underleveled characters, but yeah, no, the party is too far down. I get everyone back up and running before heading right back in. This time, everyone dies to Thandaja. I'm not really sure what I was expecting to change there. A few levels acquired, let's give this another try. Oh, what's this? The exact same outcome? Who could have expected this? Okay, well, this has over an hour of my time wasted. Let's actually do some research. Oh, just gonna try it again, huh? With nothing changed? Even a little bit? What are you doing? Past me is very difficult sometimes. Why a third time? What does this accomplish? Okay, time to do some actual planning. Let's drop my characters into trial mode to get a bunch of LP while I do some thinking. And during this, I discovered two things of note. One, the diamond armlet, which changes the contents of chests, can be picked up in a chest at level 1 of the trial mode. 2, to bring the armlet more in line with its function in prior Final Fantasies, the diamond armlet now makes the wearer immune to lightning damage. I now understand why this recording section was called stupid, because otherwise it would have been called something a little less YouTube-friendly. Back into the boss fight, and yeah, it turns out this fight is a lot easier when all of its lightning element attacks, including Thandaja, deal no damage. I still get a character stopped, but the other two can easily finish the fight, which brings me to why I went through this nonsense in the first place. Cura and Raise. Because it's locked behind an Esper, only one character in my party can learn them, but that is the whole reason Ash is on the squad. I dropped Cura out of my gambits entirely. It will just never heal enough to be usable again. Instead, Cura will heal more, and everyone. A huge upgrade for my healing limited party. Cura and Raise finally obtained, I can once more work on progression. Past the Tichita Uplands, it's time for Soken Cave Palace. And first boss time, the Vegetable Royalty. Yeah, this fight is barely worth noting. Bosch deals so much damage under Berserk and Haste, and none of the vegetables have any significant amount of HP. Then up next is Ahriman, which normally is a bit difficult in these runs. So first, my damage is wild, even considering that Bosch just attacks random duplicates once they spawn in. Once I get it down to about a third, I decide to unleash a Quickening, which Bosch does not participate in because of Berserk, which I didn't realize because I misread how Berserk works. This doesn't kill, but does almost kill, which is basically as good. A few more shots after the fact, and the boss dies. Wow, that was super easy. I didn't even get a chance to capitalize on the boss's Immobilize spell being useless since I have ranged attacks. That's disappointing. Boss is done. I reach Old Arcades, then New Arcades, which means it's new crossbow time, and new armor, and I can buy X potions. Much like Black Mages only, Vaughn is going to become an item healer before too much longer. Then it's time for the Dracor Laboratory. Which means a lot of running down hallways, changing door colors, and riding elevators, and it's already next boss time, Dr. Sid. I am a bit concerned about this fight because the good doctor is immune to damage until his little drones are all broken. I solved this problem by just turning off the Berserk Gambit, which is really all it takes in phase 1 of the fight. Once the drones do break, I turn the Berserk Gambit on, and the fight ends very quickly. I'm not going to say crossbows are good, because I don't think they are, but they are at least usable when combined with Haste and Berserk. Time to head back to Golmar Jungle to reach the Feywild. This is our next run-through area, and the best money grinding spot in the game. But before grinding, let's fight the next boss, Rafflesia, which inflicts disease, and is in an area that saps MP constantly. And the fight starts off looking real bad, with Ash getting diseased and dropping. I can get her back up, but she's going to be stuck at 1 HP for the rest of the fight because I have no serums. I have to disable her charge gambit, which I think has activated in 2 fights, both to her detriment. And at the end, Bosch and Ash are down, but Vaughn can deal just enough damage to bring the boss down as well. Well, that was spicy, but that means I can now do a good bit of grinding against the Birdmen to get all the money I will, hopefully, ever need. Grinding done, time to continue south. The enemies here are a bit tougher and starting to have some late-game HP totals. Crossbows are still holding out okay, but definitely well behind other weapons. Having reached Bergen, I head back to Valfenheim to buy some accessories, top off my item supplies, and buy some better armor. Back to Bergen, and time for the next boss, Daedalus, which has been a problem in prior runs because it spends half the fight dealing little damage, then spends the end of the fight killing my entire party. True to expectations, the first half of the fight went pretty quickly and pretty easily. Then the second phase ended. Okay, that was a bit of an upset. I dealt so much damage so quickly, he barely got to hit my party. Is it my damage? Or is it just because my party has heavy armor? I mean, yeah, Bosch is pretty durable, especially with a bubble belt, but still. Oh well, I'll take an easy win. Into Bergen proper, this area is very quick when you have Blizzaga and Bio. It is much slower with anything less than that, because the enemies have chunky HP totals. Although I will say Haste and Berserk still kicking butt. Next boss time. Tyrant hits pretty hard, and its field negates the use of Technics. Which is fine, as usual, because I don't use Technics. And while Tyrant does hit hard enough to briefly bring down Bosch and Vaughn, it's not enough to stop me from shooting him repeatedly. Sometimes the simplest solutions are best. Into the Great Crystal. Out of the Great Crystal. Time for Shemhazai. Shemhazai uses Shock and Flare liberally to deal big hits. Unfortunately, Bosch has a bubble belt, which gives him enough HP to survive either spell, and I have time to get healed back up via Kira. And because Berserk and Haste hasn't been nerfed since the last time I brought it up, this fight goes pretty quickly. And then I'm in an interesting position. I only have 2 areas left to go, the Pharos and Bahamut, but I don't want to finish this game until I complete the other video I'm working on, which I won't spoil because it won't be out for several more weeks. So I don't want to continue in this game, but don't really have the brain space for editing. So instead, I set my mind on getting the best crossbow I have access to. This means heading to the Cerobi Steppe and trying to farm diamond armlet chests, which in the Cerobi Steppe often have somewhere between 1 and 5 in 1,000 odds of giving you the item you want. So I do that, running back and forth from zone transition to chest and back. This was even worse in the original release, as you had to head 3 zones away before chests would respawn. Thankfully, it's only 1 zone now. Don't get me wrong, this is still incredibly stupid, for many reasons, but it's at least less stupid than it would have been. So I did this, for an hour, listening to YouTube videos while I accomplished nothing, in the slowest, most tedious way possible. And in that time, I got 0 of the crossbow I wanted. I did get some armor from nearby chests that is actually fairly useful though. So, next section time. Alright, stupid waste of time completed, or abandoned, as is more accurate. Time for the Ritter on a Cataract. And here is where I reveal how stupid I am. By killing all the enemies in this one section of map, then leaving and returning, a rare enemy will spawn, a Palicant. And the Palicant has the Gastrophetus as a rare steal. This is the same crossbow I was hunting for in the Cerobi Steppe, and it's right here, ready to be stolen from. Moreover, I can leave and re-enter the area to reset the Palicant and steal from it again. I net 3 crossbows in less than 10 minutes. So yeah, never hunt for items in the Cerobi Steppe. Incredibly easy crossbow acquisition completed, and it's boss time. Hydra is normally a pretty easy boss, so I'm not too worried, which was my first mistake. The problem is this boss can inflict disease to prevent healing. Normally this isn't too bad because the boss doesn't deal that much damage. Unfortunately, even with the new crossbow, I'm not killing this boss nearly as quickly as I would like. Hydro can also inflict Confuse, which drastically hinders one of my party members. I get completely wrecked on my first attempt, but I head back in immediately. I may just be stubborn, but that fight was close enough I want to give it another attempt. The fight goes pretty quickly in spite of disease and Confuse, and once I get to about a third HP, I unleash another quickening sequence in the hope of taking out the last of the boss's HP very quickly. Because Bosch isn't berserked for some reason, he gets to join and I get a very good sequence. This is enough to finish off Hydro. Seriously, it's always the weirdest bosses that make trouble in these challenge runs. In the boss arena, I pick up the Pheasant Netsuk, and equip it to Vaughn to double his item healing. I could have gotten one of these earlier, but honestly didn't really need it. I will definitely need it going forward, because the damage numbers are only going to go up from here. Ferris has a lot of random enemies and running around, but all that really matters is the bosses. So let's get into it. First up is Pandemonium. This boss is just a big turtle. The boss is pretty easy in phase 1, and then enables a shield that negates all damage. Because I have good healing, this isn't so much a hindrance as a delay. And once the palings fall, the boss goes down. Next up is Slight. This boss is normally difficult because it starts off hitting very hard, and only hits harder as its health gets lower. Too bad my damage is consistent, and higher than it can cope with. Vaughn goes down briefly, but he's back up almost immediately, and the rest of the fight goes my way. And on to the next level, I get the Tula, the best crossbow in the game. Immediately equip this to Bosch to maximize his damage output. I mean, technically there are bolts that deal slightly more damage, but they are kind of annoying to get, so I'm not going to. And now it's Fenrir time. This fight is normally pretty easy, but it actually takes a bit longer than normal, and several of my party members go down. Pretty sure it's because I just forgot to dispel bravery off the boss until 75% of the way through the fight. Once I do that, the fight then ends in my victory. Next Esper fight, Hushmal. And this time I can actually just cast Float instead of using a float mote, which is nice. Boss isn't dealing as much damage as I'd like, but it won't really get any better. Float protects against Hushmal's earth attacks, which are his most dangerous. But once his HP gets low, he combos Vaughn dead in one hit. I forgot to put the game on wait mode, so I fail to bring Vaughn back up as quickly as I need to, and then Ash and Redis go down. Balthier comes in to use some Phoenix Downs, but only Bosch has Float, so it doesn't go great. I do try to bring in Fran and Pinello, but without Bosch to hold aggro, they go down. Okay, that was pretty close. Let's give that another attempt, but less incompetent this time. This time, I upped the X potion threshold to 50% to keep my party consistently at higher HP. That's all it takes to keep Bosch up and holding aggro the entire fight. Ashmal goes down on the second attempt without issue. Next up is Gabranth. This fight never presents much of a challenge, and it's no different here, with Gabranth going down very quickly. Into the Sid fight, and I turn off the Berserk Gambit. Sid himself isn't very dangerous, but once he hits half HP, he becomes immune to damage and summons Famfrit. Switch my gambits to target Famfrit. I'm dealing good damage, and Ash is keeping the party at high HP with Cura, while Vaughn handles emergency healing with X potions and remedies. Once Famfrit's HP drops below Sid, switch my gambits again to start attacking, and Famfrit goes down. Then I can re-enable Berserk to finish off Sid without any more issues. That's the big boss rush handled, and all that's left is the Bahamut. I'm lower level than I would prefer for this next section, but hey, time mages have been exceeding my expectations for pretty much the entire game. Let's hop in and see how it goes. First up is Gabranth, again. He drops to half health very quickly before transitioning into the real fight. While he does hit and combo very effectively, I'm able to get him down to very low HP. Play a very brief game of character yo-yo before realizing this is a moment for quickenings. One of my characters is down, but the other two manage to deal enough damage to end the fight, which is probably the lowest level I've beaten this fight in a solo class run. Next up is Regular Vane, who doesn't really have anything interesting. He goes down so quickly I don't even really have any notes. Then Many Sword Vane. Ash and Vaughn take down specific swords while Bosch just fires around randomly. Vane does like to monologue and take up a lot of time with unskippable combat animations, which are very cool, once. Then they are just annoying. Despite his damage output, and my damage being pretty meh, Ash and Vaughn can keep my party healed up and slowly whittle away at Vane. All that remains is the Undying. And oh good, this area counts as being outside. So I start missing a bunch of my attacks. That's not great. Vaughn goes down very quickly, but I'm able to get him back up and running. Bosch, please, I beg you to hit better. I think there is an accessory that would boost my party's accuracy, but I really can't afford to switch out anyone's loadout. Next problem is that the Undying's holy attack one-shots Vaughn or Ash, so that's a continued not great. Vane is also dealing probably too much damage for me to keep up with, but I'll keep trying. And yeah, no, my healing just is not enough to keep my party up in the face of Undying's very strong magical attacks. Some fast swaps to my backup characters buys me some time, but Gigaflare Sword ends me anyway. Despite my best efforts, there is no coming back from that. But that's okay. It was a first attempt, and I honestly got way further than I had really expected. Which means it's time to do some prep work. My first destination is the Nabrius Deadlands, as the enemies there give good experience and aren't too difficult. Except when I get there, I decide that I am instead going to go to the Great Crystal at Bergen. You visit this area very briefly as part of the story, but now that that is completed, a whole second area opens up. This area has enemies that are higher level, and therefore give more experience. Though it should be said that the enemies may be too high of a level, which is unfortunate. I think by the time I could make good progress in this area, I'd have out-leveled the final boss by a decent chunk, so it's probably not worth it. But I pushed through a bit anyway. I know Hestega is in here somewhere, which would be very helpful. Pretty sure it is too far in to be reasonably acquired, but let's find out. Short version is yes. Long version is that if I am careful, I can pretty consistently kill these ghosts for big EXP. With how careful I have to be, I honestly think the Nabrius Deadlands and Necra Hall of Nabudis might have been faster. But oh well. This is what I did. Party up to level 10, let's restock on consumable items and give this final boss gauntlet another try. First up is Gabranth. He goes down even easier than before. I don't even need to use a quickening this time. Then Regular Vein, who is always a joke, continues to be a joke. Then Swords Vein, who also dies, but easier this time. As expected, none of the bosses were able to put up a decent fight when I was already stronger than I was on my first attempt. So I'm back to the Undying. I started by throwing out a Hestega mote and a Dispel mote to set the stage. I tried to Dispel Faith, but it fails. Not actually sure if I can't hit, but I only have a couple Dispels. Bad news is that Holy still one-shots Ash or Vaughn. I make it to Vane's first Paling, and then my party is devastated by Gigaflare Sword. I try to make a recovery, and yeah, no, it does not work even a little bit. So those 4 levels don't appear to have made any real difference. I know equipment matters more than levels in this game, but as anyone who has played the game should know, getting endgame equipment can be kind of annoying. Back into the fight, let's see if I can improve the outcome. I switch up Vaughn's gambits to cast haste on everyone, not just Bosch. Hopefully that will help with HP recovery. Then Gigaflare Sword takes down Ash again, and I simply can't recover fast enough. Much as I'd love to try that again, it's pretty clear I need more strategy. Back to Nabrius Deadlands and into the Necra Hall of Nabudis. If you kill 6 Oversouls, it will spawn a rare monster that can drop one of the best armors in the game. If you pick up the armor and then move to a new zone before the game fully registers the monster has died, you can actually keep farming it over and over again. And I spend 30 minutes trying and failing to accomplish this even once. So that is not how I will be getting good armor. Another method is to unlock late-game areas, but doing so requires completing hunts, which since I haven't been doing those, this would take hours, almost certainly longer than just grinding. But I do have an option, Trial Mode. Some very good armor pieces are available via the mid-trial levels by stealing them from enemies. This is my ticket. On level 43, by running away from these giant bugs. By reloading the level, equipping an item that prevents stop, and then running away from these bugs, I can find a Palicant. I can then steal from it and hope to get a good item. Instead, I get a Dragon Mail, but in the moment I assume I got a Maximilian because that is in my inventory, so I advance. Where did this Maximilian come from? It's not from stealing, I slowed down the footage and checked. I advanced to level 45 and tried to steal from Vishnu, which doesn't work, but that's okay. I can quit to the title screen and reload. And again. And again. And I'm bored and I give up and just move on. Maybe I'll get an item later. I do have the Maximilian I got somewhere, which is just a flat upgrade to everything. Out of trial mode, and I have a new plan. Equip the Maximilian to Ash because she is my least durable, but most important to keep alive. I change her Cura Gambit to fully remove the threshold. She will now cast Cura constantly, never stopping to do anything else. Maybe keeping my entire party's HP maxed out. Back into the Bahamut, skipping over Gabranth and the first 2 Vane fights because they are boring and easy at this point. It's just the Undying that is my problem. I also dropped the speed of combat and set the game to wait. Maybe dropping the speed will help the recovery time on actions not be so bad. Honestly not sure on that. My goodness, I wish this fight wasn't outdoors. Why did they do this to crossbows? Also, I have bubble motes in my inventory. That probably could have prevented this whole problem. Never mind, we're in the fight now. I reached the first paling, which is fine because it does nothing. Then reach the second paling, so I turn off Vaughn's attack gambit so he can focus on healing. Then it's time for Gigaflare Sword. Let's see how this goes. Bad, but not catastrophic. And because Ash is just spamming Cura, I can keep the party alive. Ash does die a couple times, but Vaughn is able to get her back up and to full very quickly. The paling falls and it's back to attacks. I elect to not turn Vaughn's attacks back on because he is too busy using potions, haste, and an elixir to make sure Ash's MP total stays high. Oh dear, Vaughn and Ash are both down. Swap in Balthier with a Phoenix down gambit. Then Phoenix down Vaughn in the back row. Sir, how many times are you going to use Gigaflare Sword? Bosch goes down and my party is at low health, so I use a Phoenix down and my one Mega Elixir. I'm in the final paling phase and Undying uses Terraflare, which doesn't seem to deal any more damage than Gigaflare Sword, but does signal the fall of Vane's final paling. With Vaughn's downtime, I use a Phoenix down on Balthier, just in case I need to bring him out again, but I don't end up needing to. Even as Undying spams Holy, my 2 healers manage to keep the party alive long enough for Bosch to shoot down the boss. And that is it. Thank goodness, the final boss is down. I really expected Time Mage to be awful, just unusably bad, but it really wasn't. Haste, Cura, Berserk, even kind of crappy weapons. Time Mage pushed through on all that. They were actually pretty good throughout most of the playthrough, or pretty okay at least. It was really only the final fight where all that power really fell apart. And a big part of that was lack of some of the endgame armor the game wants you to have, but makes really tedious to get. So, that is the end of this bonus episode. Thank you again for 1,000 subscribers, and counting. For now, if you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.